offended by something that I'm gonna say. I don't even have to issue my own disclaimer because she has done it for me. And although I don't think there's a lot of folks in here who are gonna be bothered by anything that I have to say, if there are a couple of you made uncomfortable, just roll with it for about 20 minutes. Because there are a lot of us in here that have to deal with the next 3.5 years of discomfort. So your 20 minutes is not going to be a problem. And y'all are in it now, because you invited me. And I haven't even eaten yet, so I'm not tired. I want to thank the Rock Island County NAACP for extending this invitation to me. I also would like to thank both Ms. Ballards because they have worked very diligently to get me here. The emails made me feel like I was a member of the family. I was definitely desired in this place, and so I'm glad to be able to come and join you this evening. It is an honor for me to be able to go anywhere and speak about these things that I will address tonight, because there are half the states in this country where I and others who talk about issues of race and racial injustice are essentially banned, unable to come and speak at those states' colleges, universities, K-12 institutions of education, nonprofits, or government agencies. So to be able to come and speak anywhere amidst that reality is an honor. Not only am I banned from speaking in half of the states, but my books are banned from libraries. I was, until very recently, the most banned author at the Naval Academy because our talk show host / Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, decided that not only my words, but the words of 400 other authors, most of them black folk, but a handful of us white folk who don't know our place, that our words were too dangerous to be read by men and women who are prepping to go to war if need be. They can get shot at, they can go into combat, but God forbid they read words of an anti-racist educator. Now I will say, I'm a little offended by the fact that only 4 of my books were banned. I've written 8. And I assure Brother Hegseth, the other 4 are every bit as troubling as the 4 he got his hands on. And I will tell you, when I first saw the list, the one that I didn't see on the list, because it wasn't alphabetical, they just sort of slopped it up there. So I didn't see White Like Me, my memoir, which you heard referenced a second ago. That one I didn't see on the list at first. It is there, but I didn't see it at first, and my initial reaction was that Brother Hegseth probably saw it, saw the title, and said, "Oh good, one for us." But then somebody on his staff took a look at the inside of the book and said, "Yeah, no, that's not what that's about, so we need to ban that one too." It is an honor to be here. I am a child of the civil rights movement. I know it's odd for a 56-year-old man to call himself a child of anything, but just let me roll with it, because y'all put that picture up there, and I have not only aged, I have gained weight. I really appreciate the reminder of what I looked like in 2016. So thank you for that. I am a child of the civil rights movement. I am a child of Brown v. Board of Education, a beneficiary of an integrated education in the Nashville, Tennessee public schools, where I had the opportunity to learn from amazing black educators, bond with black children, and imbibe the benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion before we called it that, back when we just called it democracy and justice and fairness. I don't need to tell you, but I will, because I still got 17 minutes, or however, I might be here a minute, you understand? I'm gonna stick around, and so far I think I'm okay with that, and y'all are okay with that. We are facing some difficult times. We have the emotional equivalent of a 6-year-old in charge of our country, and people are apparently shocked that he is doing exactly what he told everybody he was going to do. And before any of you get upset, like I said, I don't think I'm in an audience with folks that are going to mind what I just said, but just in case you're one who does, do not think I'm being cruel at the expense of the president. I am telling you what he said about himself to his biographer back in 2016 when he said, you know, when I look at myself in first grade and I look at myself today, I am pretty much the exact same person. His words, not mine. Now, y'all, I don't know about y'all. I have 2 children. They are about to be 24 and 22, 2 daughters. And I'm gonna tell you what, if when they were 12 and 10, they were still the same person that they had been in first grade, I would have sent them back for a refund. And I surely would never have voted for them for President of the United States. But that is the country in which we currently live, a man whose administration is actively rolling back civil rights protections in voting, housing, and employment that 2 generations of Americans had come to take for granted. Upon coming back to power, he closed out every pending discrimination case in K-12 schools involving students of color. He has released every police department that was under a consent decree because of brutality and racial discrimination. He has released them from those consent decrees without even an investigation as to their importance and legitimacy. I beg to remind you that a consent decree is something that the police departments voluntarily enter into because they understand that if in fact they were to be taken to court, they would probably lose, and so they agree to make changes. And yet the administration has says you don't need to worry about that anymore. This administration has cut $140 million worth of research funds from historically black colleges and universities. They are ending research on racial disparities in maternal morbidity and other indicators of health. They have closed out the section of the Centers for Disease Control that focuses specifically on sickle cell, because that, I suppose, is in their mind DEI health. They are firing actively anyone in government suspected of being in a DEI-related job, which, let's be honest, that just means any person of color, and especially black women. You look at the Labor Department data just in the first quarter of this year, over 100,000 black women in this country have lost their jobs, disproportionately in civil service because of the elimination of a number of positions across government, but even in the private sector, where we have companies capitulating to the whims of this mad king. He and his administration have sought to label any person of color in a position of authority, or sitting in a classroom of an elite college as a student, as an undeserving DEI hire or an undeserving DEI or affirmative action admit. And he says this with no sense of irony, as if his own children got where they are because of merit. As if he himself, who inherited $400 million worth of cash and assets from his daddy, actually worked for the things that he has. As if Linda McMahon, the wrestling lady who is now the Secretary of Education, was qualified for anything. As if Pete Hegseth, the DUI hire, was more qualified to be the Secretary of Defense than Lloyd Austin. To this administration, DEI is the new N-word. And they make that clear by the way that they use it as an all-purpose slur intended to blame black and brown people for everything that goes wrong with this country. And if you don't believe me, just look at the last year and a half or so, even before this man came back to power, his minions were making that argument. When that bridge in Baltimore got knocked down by that barge last year, you remember that? And the folks who are among his coterie said that that was because of the DEI mayor. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know exactly what a mayor has to do with the structural integrity of a bridge that gets hit by a barge. But because that mayor is a young black man, they called him a DEI mayor, as if somehow he just got appointed to the gig as opposed to getting elected to it in a democratic election. And as if somehow had the mayor just been a white guy, the bridge would have stayed put. But at the same time, you remember the Alaska Airlines where the emergency door flew off mid-flight? A Boeing jet 737, I think it was, that had the door fly off. They blamed that on DEI. They said it was because of a DEI program for pilots. Now, y'all, I don't know. I don't think pilots are responsible for putting the doors on the plane. And then they said, well, there's a DEI program at Boeing among the machinists. I gave a talk to the machinist union at Boeing about 15, or no, it's more than that, 20 some odd years ago, and I promise you, lots of white men in that room. So it wasn't the fault of black folks, wasn't the fault of brown folks, but they blamed it on DEI, that air collision that first week after this man came back into office in DC, where the helicopter ran into the plane that was coming into DCA. And they blame that on DEI. It is as if nothing ever goes wrong when white men are in charge. Nothing in the history of this country has ever gone wrong when white men are in charge. I mean, except for that whole economic meltdown in 2008 and 2009, where a bunch of white boys on Wall Street, I bet every one of whom had a high SAT score and went to a good business school, managed to lose $12.5 trillion worth of wealth in about 18 months. 20% of the accumulated wealth of this country's history that it took over 200 years to accumulate, they wiped it clean in a year and a half, and there wasn't a black person in the bunch. And if there had been any black folks who were responsible for the banking meltdown, black folks wouldn't even be getting jobs as tellers in this country, let alone would they be running things on Wall Street, continuing to get their bonuses and staying out of jail for all the money that they stole. But we never are supposed to blame white folks when things go wrong, when we could just turn to DEI and say that's what it was. Because white folks never ever make mistakes. We got Elon Musk, of course, over at SpaceX, and his rockets keep blowing up, right? His rockets keep blowing up, and at Tesla, his self-driving cars keep not self-driving, or when they do, they just kill people. But we're supposed to think he's a genius. I do want to at least thank Elon for one thing that he has proven beyond any question. If there was any question, Elon Musk, an apartheid baby, you do realize his background, Elon Musk has proven that if you look hard enough, you can indeed find an unqualified African American in a position of authority. I'm gonna let it, just give it a second. She got it. Some of y'all are confused. That's why I said he was an apartheid baby. You get it? Right, okay. We are facing difficult times, but they are not unprecedented. We have traveled these streets before. It's interesting to me, people in the last several months have taken to comparing us to Germany in 1932 or Mussolini's Italy in 1925, but listen to me, people. You do not need to go across the ocean to find an example of the fascism that we face. Nazi Germany didn't create fascism. Italy did not create fascism. We patented fascism. The history of black folk in this country is the history of being ruled under fascism. If we were a little bit more honest, we would have sued both Italy and Germany for copyright infringement. This is not 1932 Germany. It is not 1925 Italy. It is 1876 America, y'all. This is the beginning of the end of the next Reconstruction unless we organize and stop that. We have been here before. It is our history, not theirs, ours. They stole from us. We should have seen it coming. Carol Anderson, brilliant scholar at Emory University, told us in her brilliant book, White Rage, back before the 2020 uprising, she told us to expect it. But some of us had gotten too high on our own supply of triumphalism and progress, too comfortable with our positions and our influence on the culture to realize the counter-revolution that they have had brewing ever since Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox. The good news, and there is some, is that we know how to resist because those who came before us showed us the way, and they are begging us now to rise up collectively to defeat those that would take us backward. The ancestors are sending us signs, y'all. And if you do not believe me when I say that, ask yourself, do you really think that it is a coincidence that the Nottoway plantation burned to the ground last month? Nottoway was a slave labor camp that held 176 black bodies in bondage, bodies that were beaten and raped and denied all measure of human dignity. And this May, a mysterious fire broke out and burned the entire place to ash. And immediately my thoughts turned to Rockmaster Scott and the Dynamic Three. Y'all know the lyric, the roof is on fire. We don't need no water. I'm not gonna say the rest, don't worry, but you know the line. And for some of the white folks in here who don't know the line, Google is your friend. And then I realized when Nottoway burned what the message was. The ancestors are tired of our tentativeness. They are unimpressed by our uncertainty. They are fed up with our fickle fears. They want us to remember that those against whom they stood up were bigger and badder than the likes of those we face today. They know, as we must, that only by not fighting bullies can those bullies win. Bullies can only win when they intimidate their targets. When the targets stand up to them, they always fold. And Donald Trump is that bully. And I beg to remind you, his executive orders are not laws. Ask any attorney. Executive orders are not laws. They are press releases on fancier stationery. That is what they are. And we must fight them. We must refuse to comply. We must be prepared to lose everything, our jobs, our money, our lives, because otherwise we gain nothing. And the good news is we have a template, and that template is on display at that museum in Washington, D.C. that the president is trying so hard to censor and to silence. The National Museum of African American History and Culture, as we lovingly refer to it, the Blacksonian. That is why they are targeting that museum, y'all. It is not because they want to cover up the history of oppression. It is because they want to erase the history of resistance. They do not want our children to know how black folks survived and thrived despite the odds. They don't want Americans to hear this story of perseverance and strength, even though it is the ultimate American success story. It is a story about the very things that they tell us they care about: merit, hard work, and determination. But you see, because it is black merit and black hard work and black genius on display in that museum, it is a threat, and it must be erased or sanitized. They want our children to believe that resistance is futile, but we know the truth. I've been in that museum. I'm actually in that museum. At least until J.D. Vance removes me and the rest of us from it. I'm actually in a video at the end. It's weird. I was the DEI hire for the video. You know, little affirmative action for the white anti-racist. It's like literally President Obama and you know, a couple other black folks and me, right? And I mean, you know, I've been there. I've seen the evidence on display about which I speak, and around every corner of that museum, you will find proof that the future does not belong to those who would take us back. The future belongs to us. Remember what is in that museum and what it tells us. Emmett Till's casket is in there. There is an auction block from which black bodies were sold in there. There is a statue of Thomas Jefferson flanked by a brick wall behind him, and on every one of the bricks, one finds the name of one of his human pieces of property. The axe handle that the former governor of Georgia, Lester Maddox, used to use to chase black folks out of his restaurant is in there. And what I want to remind you of tonight, and what all of those artifacts and those memories remind us, is that the future is ours, those of us who believe in justice, because George Wallace is dead, but black folks are still here. Bull Connor is dead, but black folks still here. Sheriff Jim Clark of Selma, dead, black folks still here. Thomas Jefferson is dead, but black folks are still here. And if those men could not stop the black freedom struggle, I promise you Donald John Trump ain't the one, y'all. So since we are in a casino, I'm going to say it like they say it at the roulette table. When you look out at the history of this country and the future of where we are headed, bet on black, bet on black, bet on black. Thank you all so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Would you help me to once again celebrate the unique voice, champion of justice, Mr. Tim Wise. Thank you, dear sir, for reminding us that freedom is not the gift of the benevolent, it is the bounty of hard battles pressed and won. And so when we fight, we win. We deserve now to be lifted once again with the unique voices of those that have assembled themselves to remind us with melody and rhythm of the freedom movement. Would you help